Hi, I'm John Tickles, and welcome to Remote RPGs. Let's see, which game should I review today? Perfect! Legend of Heroes: Trails in the Sky. Now this is a great game that didn't sell particularly well, and you never hear anyone talk about, despite the fact that it was only released in 2011. Despite getting some good reviews, Trails in the Sky has barely seen the light of day to most RPGers, but I'd like to remedy that. First, I think we need to explain what the hell the Legend of Heroes series even is. The Legend of Heroes RPG series actually started as part of the Dragon Slayer series way back in 1988 by Falcom, those guys responsible for the Yeast series. The games were moderately successful in the land of the Rising Sun, but the series wouldn't see a North American release, save for an overlooked TurboGrafx 16 game, until 2011. That was when Xseed finally took it upon themselves to localize The Legend of Heroes 6, Sora no Kiseki, also known as The Legend of Heroes: Trails in the Sky. This game was actually the first in a trilogy of PSP ports of the 2004 PC title, as Xseed promised to localize the whole trilogy. Trails in the Sky creates a whole new world that looks kind of like a 1900-esque time period. 3 neighboring countries are recovering from war, and technology has revolved around these powerful energy sources called orbits. That's just the extremely condensed version, but the game and instruction booklet have a lot more information on the political and technological history of this new world.
Your knowledge of the land shall be great.
The player follows the adventures of Estelle Breit, the daughter of a war hero, and her adopted brother, Joshua, who was brought home by her father 5 years prior under mysterious circumstances. You say adoption, I say kidnapping. When the siblings turned 16, really just beginning the most emotionally turbulent and unpredictable period of their lives, they set out across the incredibly hostile world on a perilous quest to become full-fledged bracers. And what the hell is a bracer? Nope, it's not slang for a dentist. They're kinda like police officers, but they aren't really backed by the government, so kind of like park rangers, I guess? I don't know, they're just an organized group that think they have some kind of power over people.
I'm a cop, and you will respect my authority!
However, it isn't long before disaster strikes, as Estelle and Joshua have to deal with terrorist attacks, the disappearance of their father, protecting their country and their queen, and acting in school plays. Legend of Heroes! You travel across the Kingdom of Liberal through bustling cities and quiet seaside towns in a 40-hour or so quest. That's not counting the ridiculous amount of quality side quests. The game feels very much like a PlayStation 1 era RPG, as you have your typical dungeons, towns, and more to explore. I love this world that the game creates. Aside from an interesting history and political issues, it's just a fantastic, large, non-linear area with basically no backtracking. However, that's not even the best part of Trails in the Sky, because that accolade belongs to the characters and dialogue. There is a large cast of both playable and non-playable characters in the game, so I'll just go over the major ones here. There's the Tomboy Estelle, the bright, energetic, and completely clueless protagonist of the game. She's usually the butt end of most jokes, and as simple as her character is, she's still really likable and definitely gets some of the best lines in the game. But, I don't know, she definitely reminds me of some evil, terrible, repressed memory. Joshua Breit is our other main protagonist, and a complete foil to Estelle. He's quiet, polite, exceptional at most things he does, and sometimes sarcastic, as he's responsible for keeping his tactless sister in check. Burdened by his past, Joshua keeps mostly to himself, and really only opens up to Estelle. Okay, I can't just keep ignoring the elephant in the room. You get out of here! Also, Joshua is Estelle's main love interest, as well as her adopted brother. Okay, that's pretty weird, but they're the same age, they were raised by the same man for 5 years, so I try to think of them as more as childhood friends. Their chemistry is the heart of the story, and besides, it's nowhere near as bad as Lunar, where the two characters were basically raised together as toddlers. Yeah. Okay, I really need to shake this awkwardness. Anything? Anything?
I'm just going to relax and water my lawn for the next week or two.
Gee, thanks, guy watering his lawn enthusiastically. Scheherazade is a mentor to the two young Breit children, as an experienced bracer who loves to drink and uses a whip in combat. Just try and guess what crowd she's appealing to. Oh, boobies! There's Agate, or Agate, and his personality is... You know what? I don't even need to say it. Just look at him. Show me your answer in 3, 2, 1. Oh, fine. He's the antisocial guy who carries a giant sword and has a dark past, but he really does have a soft spot, and he learns to work with others throughout the course of the game. Change his hair, and yeah, there it is. There's the polite and sensitive Chloe, who's a fencing champion, volunteers with orphans, and quite frankly, makes all other 16-year-olds look like Genghis Khan. However, the best character is Oliver, a wandering musician who's traveling the world, spreading his love of the arts. Oliver usually drives the other characters batshit insane by hitting on anyone he considers beautiful, male or female. He completely steals the show whenever he's on screen, and provides a lot of laughs throughout the quest. Oh, there's also Bear Man crossed with Chuck Norris, and the absurdly cute character that has to show up in every RPG. Although the protagonists are great, the antagonists aren't slackers either. An interesting thing about Trails in the Sky is that the major villains are extremely subtle and not prominent for most of the game. Some of them also have noble goals, and it's more interesting to see this kind of villain in an RPG, rather than the evil emperor who wants to take over the world and is always laughing evilly in the background, or that guy who just wants to be a god. I even love the minor villains, like the group of goofy yet loyal sky bandits run by 3 siblings who you felt sorry for and always wanted to see more of, as they were kind of anti-heroes. Hey, that's familiar too. Really, this is just scratching the surface of the characters list, as I have a lot more favorites as well. Although many of these characters have been seen many times before, it's really their interactions and dialogue that makes these characters a lot of fun. Everyone seems to play off of each other really well for the most part, and there's a lot of humor and charm to this game that makes it enjoyable the whole way through. Of course, at the start, there is a lot of cheesiness and some awkward moments, particularly when the character sounds like they're reading a description from the manual. Look here, for example. "Geez, Estelle, you sure are such a silly and quirky character."
Everybody got that?
Hey, what's that? Is that the manual on the floor? Were you reading the manual too, Joshua? Besides little things like that, the game is translated superbly well, and it really pays off as it adds a lot of charm and humor to the story through the dialogue. It's a good thing too, because there is a lot of reading in this game and cutscenes littered throughout the quest, which I really thought played to the strengths of the game, so I had no complaints about that. The story itself has a pretty relaxed pace, as it takes a while for the stakes to get really high, as a large portion of the story is just spent meeting characters or sometimes doing things that aren't directly related to the main plot, like visiting the hot springs. Legend of Heroes! This really wasn't a bad thing. The thing is that you just have to stick with the game a little long just to get invested, which could be a deal breaker for some players, but I definitely think it's worth it for the payoff. The main story is always building slowly in the background as the questions start to pile up in a pretty simple yet pretty deep story. Although there are many twists throughout, it's near the end where things really start to get heavy, and this is amplified as the game's setting itself up for 2 sequels. As weird as it is to say, it's not even really the story that carries the game, but the characters themselves. Just watching them interact and face adversity. Hell, these characters are so fun to watch, I wouldn't mind watching Estelle and Joshua just go grocery shopping. Legend of Heroes! Alright, it's time to delve into the actual gameplay. The game doesn't break much ground in this department, as you have an Earthbound-like enemy encounter system and grid-based combat. Where the game deviates starts with the orbment system, where you can equip certain types of stat boosters on each character. Although this added some more strategy, I found that a lot of my orbment sets look the same on each character. The real strategy in the game comes from the use of S-breaks. In combat, attacking and being attacked fills your craft bar, and once that reaches 100 or higher, you can activate your S-break, which immediately, and quite rudely, interrupts your next opponent's turn so you can perform a special move.
Hold it!
Since a lot of your special moves can take away precious CP points, timing the use of such attacks is absolutely critical for being victorious in battle. Couple this with the fact that magic takes a couple of turns to cast, and the different ranges for different attacks, and you have a pretty well-paced battle system that leaves a lot of room for strategy. Each character has their own specific movesets and inherent stats that you have to consider and learn to use effectively. This all made the battle system pretty enjoyable. Of course, there were some issues, like when enemies spammed moves, or the fact that you could save up S-breaks just to rape bosses, or how the game randomly handed out bonuses many times to the enemy. But those were the only flaws, really. The game had a good difficulty too, that was a little bit on the easier side, but it was still challenging enough to get your mind going. Okay, there's one thing I absolutely have to mention, and it's a minor spoiler. A few weeks back in my Professor Layton review, I made a joke about an orphanage being on fire.
Professor, the orphanage is on fire! The corpses are starting to pile up! We need to alert emergency services immediately!
Ah, Luke, that reminds me of a puzzle I once heard. Ignoring the fact that I sounded like an inhuman douchebag, when I played this game a little later, I happened upon this little cutscene earlier in the game. Yep, I called it. An orphanage on fire. I swear, I didn't even plan this, and I'm convinced I can see in the future. Or maybe it's an event that already happened. I bet I could see future reviews. Anyway, that was just something I thought I would mention to you guys. I tried telling it to my psychiatrist, but he just ignored me and wrote more things down on his notepad. The graphics in the game weren't bad. The locations and areas you visit are well detailed and visually impressive. The architecture and designs of the machinery were all imaginative and enjoyable to look at. And this contrasted especially well to the natural settings you travel across as well. However, the character sprites did leave a lot to the imagination. But remember, this is a port of a 2004 PC game, so such things can be forgiven, considering that the character portraits and dialogue can cover the slack. I could also complain that the introduction doesn't have enough animation, or that the voice acting was well done but extremely anemic, but remember, this isn't a Final Fantasy game. Xseed took a big gamble by localizing a basically unheard of game, so they definitely didn't have the budget that many Square Enix titles get. But remember, what this game lacks for in small things, it makes up for in heart.
Ha! Gay!
Legend of Heroes! The music in this game was something I rarely see in RPGs. Like the pacing of the game and its general atmosphere, the music of Trails in the Sky is mostly soft, melodic, and often jazzy, or even something you'd hear in Professor Layton. For example, just take the title of the main battle theme, Sophisticated Fight. The soundtrack ranges from sweeping to melodic to relaxing and offers some really interesting tunes that match the style of the game and manage to be pretty unique. The soundtrack definitely held its own, and you're sure to find at least a half a dozen iPod-worthy tunes here. To conclude, Trails in the Sky was a gamble, but when I picked it up on a whim, it truly soared above my expectations. The game has a fantastic group of characters, a good story, a pretty fun battle system, a large non-linear world to explore, and much more. Yes, it has some blemishes, but it's such a solid RPG and a great start to an unheard of series. Trails in the Sky carries a lot of charm, promises a good time, and it's a game that more people should play. Xseed has expressed that they're having some difficulty getting the next two games over here, so I invite you to at least try and play this game to support the cause. It's an easy game to recommend because of its wide appeal, and it's not that expensive. Besides, Trails in the Sky offers way more than recent games I've seen in the genre. Well, that's all I've got for now, so until next time, I look forward to our next random encounter. Legend of Heroes!